Now, while we're here, you can see that the transform panel contains all the same position and width and height information that we saw in the control panel. And like I said before, the anchor point essentially as to where the transformation takes place from. We've also got in here the ability to rotate and shear an element. So if we rotate here, one advantage is at least we can use an anchor point to choose at which point that rotation applies from. So let's go back to our main selection tool, V, okay? And for now, we could lock the layer, we can lock the wheel, we can come back to that later on, and we can go ahead and hide it. And let's come back to our stripes, make sure that that's unlocked. So let's come over to our A3 again, okay? Over here on the left side, we can see our stripes that go across the page and also these horizontal guides that we've got. If I go ahead and select this one, just so we can see it working, let's go ahead and choose a top left anchor point and maybe go down and choose, I don't know, a 45-degree rotation, and you can see exactly what has happened. So definitely a little bit more useful than free transform when it comes to specifying an anchor point from which to rotate. So I just wanted to point that out so you know that it's there. Now we can use this to adjust the height of our shape because I do want it to snap down to our second line here, which remember we did 10 and 20 millimeters in total. So making sure that we have one of these top anchor points selected, let's come down and make sure we change this now to 20, okay? So that fills out our overall height and it changed the whole group automatically. It's not just one element in there. So this kind of looks good because we've got, a larger poster, therefore we should, have larger stripes here and utilize that nice color design that we've got. Now something else, I do want this to move down by 10 millimeters. Now you already know the move dialog box and if I asked you to do that, you'd be there, you'd have it done by now, which is wonderful. But I do want to show you something else called nudging. Now every once in a while, if you're trying to position something just bit by bit, you don't want to do it mathematically, and maybe you don't want to use the cursor because guides are getting in the way. So you can actually nudge something slightly in either direction until it gets into the right location. And for this, you simply use the arrow keys on the keyboard. Now it's important to know what your preferences are set to, and I did point this out back in one of the earlier lessons where we had a look at the preferences. Bring up your preferences dialog box and you'll see the very first item here, keyboard increment, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 1 millimeter. That's precisely the value I wish to use just for this example, okay? Go ahead and click OK. And now if I use the down arrow on the keyboard, you'll see it's going to nudge 1 millimeter at a time. And I can actually see that happening over here in the Y-axis. I'm at 123. For every down I do, it's moving 1 millimeter, which is really very cool. Now, like I said, you could do any value here. You could make it very small and just minutely nudge something into place, which is fine. But the other side of this is if you hold down the Shift key and then do your down arrow or up, whichever way you're nudging, and don't forget that includes left and right as well. If you hold down the Shift key and do the nudge, you'll multiply the value by 10, okay? So let's say, for example, I'm going to go back up until we're at 120, then hold down the Shift key, one down arrow, boom, I'm straight into 10 millimeters down, okay? So in some cases, you can use the move dialog. In other cases, if you know what your preferences are set to, you can get there a little bit faster just by knowing a couple of additional shortcuts.